So Drew, I'm just going to jump right into it because I'm so excited about this conversation that we're going to have here today. I'm curious because you and I are so similar in kind of the work and the missions that we're both on. I don't know a lot about your story, but I want to hear what's been the journey that you've been on that has led you to have this mission, which you're very clear in what you're doing with helping men of God stop porn. So I kind of want to go into, your background and what's led you to get to this point where this is the work that you're doing, because it's definitely a topic that not a lot of people want to talk about. I'm excited to dive into it, but let's start there. Let's start with the journey that's led us up until the point where we're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going through pre-engagement counseling. Okay. I don't know if people like that or if that's a thing. I know premarital counseling is a thing, but for me, I did pre-engagement counseling where before I knew that I wanted to make a commitment to this woman and ask her to marry me, we talked with wise, older people, and they told us to take some time and ask each other some very difficult questions. Basically, what do I need to know about you that could potentially prevent me from marrying you? Like, what are the skeletons in the closet? What are the deep, dark secrets that you'll be bringing into my life when we get married? And I remember it was October 2015. I was sitting on my fiance's or my future fiance's couch, and I couldn't look her in the eyes. I was just staring at the carpet. My stomach was tight. I knew I needed to tell her about my recent relapse into porn. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. And she saw how pained and frustrated I seemed. And I told her. And in that moment, she looked at me and loved me and said she still wanted to marry me. And in that moment, I knew that if I want to marry this woman, I need to be 100% free from pornography. I cannot bring that into her life. I have to be the man who she can marry with 100% confidence and never have to worry about my sexual behavior because porn's in the past and it's never coming back. And that's how my journey started.
Got it. So this was, going back almost five years ago. You said something there. You said I needed to share with her my relapse. So this means that prior to this point, like you had already identified that you had an issue and had attempted to stop.
Yeah, actually. So ever since I was 13 years old, porn and masturbation were a normal part of my routine. And I thought that was perfectly normal for a kid until I became a Christian and found out, well, maybe Jesus is not okay with this. And I tried to stop and I couldn't. And it was really frustrating. In college, I experienced some freedom from my behavior by getting into support groups and opening up to other guys about it, beginning to go through a discipleship process. Okay. But then after college, when I lost that whole support system, lost my group, lost friends, lost all of the momentum I had gained in that post-college transition, which is just so hard and discouraging, I entered into a season of going way back to the beginning of acting out with porn and masturbating and saying, God, why? I thought you healed me from this. I was the victory story. I was the success story. And I was leading other groups. I was writing a book about it. And it was at that point that I had the worst season of struggle. And coming out of that is when I met this amazing woman. And I had had over a year of freedom before, but it came back out of nowhere. And I was at a point where I was saying, yeah, I'm not as free as I thought. And so the most amazing thing is that God saved my marriage before it started.
Yeah, that's incredible. And when you shared that kind of feeling you had, when you looked your at the time girlfriend, future fiance, and now your wife, like when you looked her in the eyes, and the thought brewing in the back of your mind was, this woman has every right to walk away, to leave, probably expecting that. I experienced a very similar feeling, just a year ago, February 15th of 2019. So just shy of a year from the date that we're recording this podcast was the day that I shared with Stephanie, who is my girlfriend. We've gone through, I guess, pre-married, pre-engagement counseling. We participated in a group just last season at our church. So, we're having those discussions of what our life looks like together as we sort out, a few things, both individually before we, take that next step. But, when I shared it with her, my thought was, at the time, like, she didn't know for me, like, that I didn't have porn. She just didn't really understand that it was a problem to the extent that it was. I dropped hints and things to her like, hey, like, why don't you partake in it with me? Just kind of like seeing like how far I could push it. But yeah, my thought was when I truly opened up and became vulnerable to her, that there was a high probability that may be the day that she decides that it's over, because we were in a rough point within our relationship. So I understand that feeling, of like that real love from another, from another person, from a human being. How did it kind of unfold, I guess, from that point, to get you to where now you're not just free from it in your own life, but you're actually taking the steps to help other men? Because there had to have been a process that you've had to go through internally, because breaking free is incredible. It makes you feel amazing, but then to actually open up and start to talk about it and then provide coaching and help to other men. So what has this kind of journey been for you to go from that day to where now your work, your site, your podcast, your videos, everything that you're doing, kind of what have you gone through to get to where we're at today?
Yeah. Well, when I looked into her eyes, when she had every right to reject me and she accepted me, that gave me so much more motivation than any kind of moral command to be sexually pure or fight the battle. It's like, no, like there is so much love and affirmation and hospitality coming at me right now. I'm going to do everything I can to learn and train and grow until I've finally found victory that's going to last for my whole life, not just for a few months or a year. And so I took every class I could take. I flew across the country, trained with Institute for Sexual Wholeness, ITAP. I'm a Pastoral Sex Addiction Professional now. I've read every book, every video series, and there was one YouTube video by Patrick Carnes. Maybe you can provide a link in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll definitely link that up.
Okay. And Patrick Carnes was talking about sexual fantasies, the things that we find arousing and attractive. When you get an urge to watch porn, it's never just porn in general. There are specific themes that appeal to us in our desires, in the way that we're wired. And usually we never talk about it. That's the secret stuff that if you're in an accountability group, if you're in some kind of recovery group, usually you don't talk about what did you put in the search bar or what did you find most arousing. But for me, that was the breakthrough. That was the key. Understanding my fantasies and my attractions and where they came from in my story, that destroyed the self-hatred that was at the core of my use of pornography. And it allowed me to love myself in a whole new way, because it meant I'm not a freak. I'm not gross. I'm not disgusting. I can understand where these weird fetishes are coming from. A sexual fetish is a big part of my story. And that was the kind of the breakthrough moment of getting free, not just from the behavior, but free from the battle. Like it's not a struggle anymore. It's not a stressful thing anymore, because when I get triggered by a fantasy or something that's really attractive to me, I see through it. Because on the other side, there's a little boy who needs love. And he's the one who is still attracted to pornography. He's the one who's still at risk. And so if I can get to know the little child who needs love underneath my problem with porn, then it's no longer a matter of fear and controlling my behavior. It's about loving the younger self who's showing up in these moments when I get triggered. That changes everything, man.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's, like if you look into and read, and I've done, my fair amount of work as well, and trying to unpack and uncover what has led me to this point, but it's identifying where those triggers are coming from. And yeah, like you said, I mean, so many times it's going to be related and correlated to kind of childhood trauma. I mean, and this is not exclusive to what you and I are discussing, porn addiction. Like if you really look at the things that people are held bondage to, or that are holding them back and preventing them from really stepping into who they are created to be, there's so much going on from that childhood trauma kind of positioning. So what are some things that you now work with your guys? I know this video is great, and we're definitely gonna link that up, but if somebody's out there and they're intrigued by this thought here, and they're like, okay, well, what does this look like for me? Like, do they have to go hire a therapist or hire a professional or hire you, or are these things that people can figure out on their own?
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly helps to have a guide. Somebody who has been down this road before, somebody who's done their own work.
Yeah.
I think that's even more important than having a certified sex addiction therapist. Having somebody who's gone through a healing process, and so they can take you on that process. Because not everybody who's licensed and certified has been in the trenches.
Yeah, they're just reciting information from a book that they read, and certifications and studies that have been done. And it's funny you said that, because I recorded a solo podcast that'll be coming out the week prior to this one this morning, and I said exactly that same thing. Like I'm a huge kind of personal development junkie. I've been studying Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar, and I mean all these guys going back to when I was like 21 years old. So I mean, we're talking like 15 plus years now. And Tony Robbins has a quote. It's like, you want to become successful, find a person that's achieved what you're trying to accomplish and model them. And this has been an underlying theme in really every episode that I've had. I feature guys that it's not 100% porn related, but I'm featuring guys that have hit low points in their life and now have built, massive success in their life. We've had recovering heroin addicts, recovering porn addicts, recovering alcoholics. We've had people that were born into abusive and alcoholic families, and now they're crushing it, having incredible impact. And one thing that is consistent with all of them is they always had a mentor, coach, guide, person leading them along the way. So 100% agree with that. Like if you're trying to fight this battle alone, like you're fighting a battle that you're probably going to have a hard time winning.
Yes, absolutely. And, for me, Patrick Carnes was the wise man who told me what I needed to hear. But there were also guys who were fathering me and refathering me throughout my healing process. Now, I like how you mentioned Tony Robbins, because he has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Heal the boy and the man will appear."
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about today.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Now, within that, yes, there are tools. There are methods and very simple ways that you can do some of this work with your mentor wherever it is that you live, or even on your own. And we can talk about that.
Yeah. Let's go right to that. I mean, no reason to, beat around the bush. Let's jump into, the tactical stuff. So like what's step one, like if somebody's out there, they're dealing with this, like where do they start?
Okay. So if you want to understand your sexual fantasies. There's so much out there. Most people don't know about it. One great book is called Unwanted by Jay Stringer. And I highly recommend that book. I actually work for Jay, and we just created a video series called the Sexual Fantasy Framework. And you can link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
That will take you through this process of learning how to unpack your sexual fantasies. And it's the framework of look, listen, and love. That's how you do it.
Okay.
And if you watch the Sexual Fantasy Framework, you'll see more about that. I teach my clients in my private coaching sessions something I created called the Floss Method. Personally, I hate flossing. I like brushing my teeth. I mean, that's rather comfortable. Flossing, man, it's kind of gross. It's like, oh, you have to get down deep, and you don't know what's down there. It's hidden, and you know, sometimes it's messy, and it's not fun. It's time consuming, and really, that's kind of what we need to do with our brains is get into those deep, dark, hidden places, not just the surface level of like, oh, I have this sexual urge, or I'm, believing this lie about myself. Well, let's get down into the deep areas of where that's really coming from. That's what the Floss Method allows you to do. So FLOSS. Should I take you through it?
Let's go.
Okay. And there's a Floss worksheet too, man. You're going to have some long show notes today. So the Floss Method starts with F. When you get sexually aroused or triggered, like something really grabs your attention. It's not just like, oh yeah, she's pretty, or he's a beautiful man. It's like, this thing has a power over you. F stands for fear. Mm-hmm. There's a fear response naturally that occurs in our brains. The amygdala is activated, and you have three options: fight, flight, or freeze. And depending on which survival strategy worked out for you best when you were a kid, you're probably going to go to one of those every time. So in this fear response, it's when your breathing gets shallow and you can't think straight. Maybe you're anxious, or you're agitated, or you're angry. For some of us, the impulse is, I got to overpower that thing. I need to power up in response to this trigger. For some of us, we shut down and we go into freeze mode. And that's what I would do. In my brain, I would numb out, and I could think, I could go off into my own little world, but I'm not even present to the world around me. So, what is it for you when you get triggered? Here's the first step. You need to ask yourself, is this a fight response I'm feeling? Is it a flight response where I want to run away? Or is it a freeze where I just shut down? And I think a lot of us in our addiction recovery are kind of stuck in one of those areas. You get a sexual temptation. You're like, oh, okay, I'm going to fight the battle for purity. I'm going to slap a Bible verse on that thing. I'm going to pray until I overpower it. Or it's flight. It's run away, avoid, flee sexual immorality, get out of there. And that's okay at a surface level. And those impulses are not bad. They're still based in fear though.
And I think it's a level of awareness, and this step is an acknowledgement that like these temptations are like the feelings they're never going to completely go away. Like your approach to stopping this isn't going to be to just rid myself of any of the temptation in the world because, hey, it's 2020. Like that's just not going to happen. So it's an acknowledgement, an awareness factor that, hey, when I get it, like I instantly need to program my brain to go into this state, which I'm assuming is going to take us into the L. Is this going to be kind of where we?
Yeah. So ultimately, every sin underneath it has some kind of fear. And that fear-based response in our brains and our bodies could be fight, could be flight, could be fear, freeze.
Yep.
So it's really helpful to just name that, because that's always going to happen. You're always going to get hit with that. And to be able to name it is like, okay, I can begin to process what I'm feeling. The L stands for lie. Under every sin, there's a fear, and under every fear that is causing you to feel a really strong urge that's controlling you to watch pornography, there's some kind of lie down there. You might not be able to name it at this point, and that's okay. We can come back to the L later.
Yeah.
But for me, for example, let's say I see a person who is really sexually attractive to me for some reason. My gut instinct is, for example, to run away. Well, why? What might be the lie that's down there? Mm. Maybe the lie would be that if I talk to her, I'll be embarrassed or ashamed, or rejected. And so you might not know why yet, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. We're going to go to the OS. The next one is actually 2 letters.
Okay.
So even if you can't name the lie, like, for example, I'm a piece of trash, or I'll never be good enough, or something, even if you can't name the lie, you think of that feeling and you ask yourself the $1 million question. When have I felt this way before? The OS stands for origin story. And this is when you begin to connect with the memories that are causing you to be triggered. You never get triggered unless there's some kind of memory in the past that's informing your reaction. And usually we don't know what that is. That's the hidden place in our brains that the Floss Method helps you get to, is the origin story. And so you ask yourself, okay, when have I felt this way before? Maybe when have I seen a girl who looks like this before, or a guy who looks like this before? When have I felt like a failure before? When have I felt the need to fight and power up in a situation and get, unleash my power? Or when have I felt the need to run away? When have I felt the need to shut down? And see what comes up for you. I know that this sounds complicated. It's actually really simple because our brains are programmed with something called implicit memory. So explicit memory is when I remember that my birthday is April 2nd. Implicit memory is like, I hear a song and, oh my gosh, I love this song. Why do I love this song so much? Oh yeah, because we played it on my birthday and it was awesome. And so I'm asking, okay, when have I heard this song before? When have I felt happy about this song before? Oh yeah. And that's when your implicit memory becomes explicit. So there are memories that are not stored in your brain, they're stored in your body. And when you say, when have I felt this way before? You're allowing yourself to access that implicit memory. You tracking with me?
Yeah, that's great. No, I'm right here. I'm right here with you. I'm letting you go with it because this is yours to shine.
Let me give you an example of this. So for me, a sexual fetish that I've not really understood for most of my life is being attracted to orthodontics in some way, braces. You get the idea. Okay. And I hated myself for this. And I was like, oh my gosh, why am I so affected by this? And that was a big part of my self-hatred. Well, okay, when have I felt this way before? It took me back to the middle school years. That's where I needed to focus. That's where I needed to heal the boy. Another thing about my fantasies, I was always the one in power. I was always the one in control. And the other person was either going along with what I wanted to happen in the scenario, or they didn't like it. So they were submitting to me. That was another part of it. Okay, so I've got some clues now about what's really at the root of why this affects me so much. And there are 2 categories of kind of ways that you can ask, okay, when have I felt this way before? One is repetition of okay, when have I felt this way before? That's the orthodontics are going back to middle school. It's a repetition of what was happening in middle school. With the power and submission thing, it was actually a reversal. It wasn't repetition, it was reversal. In middle school, I felt totally powerless. I felt weak. I felt unable to do anything about my life situation. And so this fantasy offered me the reversal of that, where I'm in power, where I don't have to submit. I get to be the one who decides. So you might ask yourself, when have I felt this way before? Or when have I felt the exact opposite? You know, for me, those fantasies where I was in power, man, they were giving me the opposite of what I experienced. Because when I was 13 years old, my dad decided to move our family from Canada, where I loved life, to Texas, where I hated it. And nothing against Texas, but I don't want to live there. And part of that's from my own baggage. But
yeah, well, that's a major culture shock and transition for a 13-year-old going from Canada to Texas. I can see
and going from a small private all boys school to a massive public school with boys and girls, and feeling completely powerless. Also, my dad actually moved before us, so he left us for a year, and he was coming back once every 2 weeks, but he was gone. So I'm feeling abandoned by my dad, betrayed by my family, feeling alone, and spending a lot of time at the computer playing video games and looking at pictures of girls in my class who I did not know how to relate to. And guess what? They all had braces. Now my fantasies are beginning to make sense. Yep. That's a big part of it's called the arousal template. It's each of us has kind of a cocktail of what we're attracted to. Repetitions and reversals of life experiences that we've had. And the way you begin to access them is getting to the origin story of, okay, I'm feeling this really strong trigger. Okay, when have I felt this way before? When have I felt the opposite? And you get back to those stories and you begin to see that you may not know why they make sense, but they do make sense. And now comes the last S. And by the way, there might be a time right now to go back to the lie. Once you understand the origin story, you might be able to name that lie. So for me, I think one of the lies I believed was that no girl will ever like me. And man, even just saying that, it brings up some emotion for me. And once you can identify that origin story and the lies that you believed because of it, you enter into the last S, which is sadness. Most of us don't like feeling sad. We feel weak when we feel sad. We feel maybe like, oh, I feel like a victim when I'm sad. Actually, sadness is how you tap into love. If you're sad about something, it means that you really love a person or a thing, and that when it's lost or when it's damaged or when something bad happens, you're sad about it. And so there is a healing power in sadness, a softening effect of being able to look back at that little boy who was alone in Texas, feeling totally powerless, and just be sad with him. And that's the opposite of the fear-based response. Feeling like, gosh, I have to try to control my sexual behavior. I don't like these feelings coming up, and I'm going to use porn to control it. We don't have to live in fear. We can choose love. And in the experience of sadness, when I say no, no girl will ever like me, that makes me really sad that I believed that lie and that it affected me so much. And this is when I'm beginning to learn to love myself. And the self-hatred can't survive when sadness comes in the room. It's kind of like that movie Inside Out. If you've seen Inside Out.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No.
Well, it's a movie about the brain of a teenage girl, and in the end, sadness saves the day. It's the underrated emotion. So this is a method that I use with my clients to help them process sexual and emotional triggers. And sometimes at the end, when you realize that origin story, man, you just start weeping.
Yeah. Now, does this only work like at the moment of trigger, that initial kind of feeling, that sexual arousal? Is that the only time that I can go through, the 5 letters, which would be a 4-step process? Or is there a way for a guy to, maybe in a early morning kind of meditative journal type of setting, tap into that feeling of fear of what, because you know what it feels like if you've experienced any of that before, then okay, I can take myself there, and then I can kickstart it and then go through the other steps. Like, would that be something that would be as productive as doing it like in the real time? Because maybe you're at work or you're out or you're doing something and it happens, but you can't really address it and go through the steps right then and there. But if you could, make a mental note of, hey, let me visit that later on. Like, I think you'd have to be pretty self-aware, to be able to bring that back. But I definitely know it's something that could be done. Would the process work as effectively if they did it not in real time?
It's even more effective that way.
Okay.
Because when you get triggered, your rational, moral decision-making abilities are impaired.
Yeah.
So it's actually best when you're in that place of safety, with a journal or with a trusted mentor.
Okay.
Somebody who you can process this alongside. That's the ideal. If you get into a bind in a situation, yes, you can use this as an emergency tool. Probably what's better is to call a friend and then floss it out together.
I like that. Floss it out together.
Yeah. And this is deep. It's not simple, and it's not something I like to do. But I want to give you just one more example of what this has looked like for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I was booking an Airbnb while I was on the road with my family, and an Airbnb opened up just unexpectedly out of the blue at like 9 p.m. for that night. I was like, oh yes, I hit the jackpot. Like, I am going to get this Airbnb. And I delayed a little bit too long, and somebody else got it. Somebody else picked it up, and it wasn't available anymore. And the next ones that were available were like $200 more. For most people, this is just a standard little disappointment in your day. For me, it crushed me in that moment. Like, I was so affected. I was so triggered. I wanted to watch porn. That was probably the most significant temptation to watch porn since 2015. And I was like, why? Like, and when you get those situations where, hey, it's a little disappointment or something sad, or it's something, that was frustrating. And for most people it's normal, but for you, it's a huge deal. Mm-hmm. Like, disproportionately, it makes you angry or anxious. It's like, okay, then you got some flossing to do. And so I went through the questions. Okay, I'm going into flight. I just want to run away. I want to withdraw. I want to get out of here. I feel like this is horrible. Lie. And I knew what the lie was, actually. The lie for me, not getting this Airbnb, costing our family $200, was I am a financial failure. That was the lie that I believed. When have I felt like that before? When I was a kid, I remember losing a lot of things. I had ADD. One time I lost one hockey skate, not 2 hockey skates, just one. And I remember my dad getting angry with me about that. I remember my parents buying me expensive things that I never used. And I always felt like I was a financial burden to them, or like I was costing them more money, and that I wasn't being a good son because I was blowing a lot of money for them. And as soon as I realized that, I just instantly started weeping and went into sadness, and invited my wife to be with me in that sadness. And it was so healing. It brought this greater awareness. It brought this level of freedom to where I have a new attitude towards finances now, because I was able to realize what was going on in those deep places in my brain. Very simple kind of flow, but it can have huge results.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad you went there too, because you highlighted the fact that just because you flossed once and figured it out,
Yeah.
like you got to keep coming back to flossing, or you're gonna have an angry
the dentist says,
or
man.
you're gonna have an angry dentist on your hands, and by an angry dentist, you're gonna have an angry partner in life, or you're gonna end up falling into, you know, a trap in a cycle of going back to your old habits. So flossing is not something you only do once. You have to consistently be doing it. Do you recommend like in the early stages? Like, do you say do it daily, weekly, when it comes up, or do you kind of have tips and strategies on how often you should be doing it for guys that are kind of in that early stage of recovery?
Yeah, well, I don't know how often you get triggered, but when there is a trigger that kind of keeps coming up for me, that's a warning sign, or that's an indicator that I should really pay attention to that. That's something for me to process, either on my own or with a safe person. And, you know, how often should you do it? Probably at the early stages, there are one or two big triggers that you just haven't dealt with yet. And you don't understand them. So rather than try to, you know, floss everything and all the different things, like pick one thing that just really affects you, that you're like, when this happens, I can't do anything. It's like all of my rational adult brain goes out the window. You know?
So you're saying like floss the topic a handful of times, like, because chances are like you didn't get all the loose food out on the first round.
And you keep discovering things about the origin story and the different lies that you believe. You know, for example, you know, for the financial thing, it was like, I'm a financial failure, or I'm a burden to people I love. So you're going to find a lot down there, more than you bargained for.
Yeah.
And oh man, there's always more healing necessary. The good news is, because of the God we worship, because of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit who lives in us, there is always more healing available.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
We've talked, you mentioned it a few times, you know, you are now, you know, a coach and accountability kind of leader for other men. But you talked about it kind of in your story, where at one point you had this group, you had, you know, guys that were in your corner. And when you removed yourself from that is when it started to kind of, you know, cycle back down. I have shared more times than I could count the role that strong Christian men have played in my growth and my recovery. So talk about that, because if anybody asks me the first step, it's like, find a group of men that you can support you, and, you know, we're going to feed into you. You know, do you recommend guys joining groups, you know, within their church? You recommend joining groups outside of church? Do you recommend just having one guy that you literally, if it's not you, like somebody else that you just literally just unload everything into, and then they're there to be that kind of, what's your recommendations on how to find these? Because it is something that we tend to keep as a secret. You know, we're ashamed of it for multiple reasons. We don't want that judgment. So how do you get past that, you know, with guys just saying, no, I don't want to tell anybody about this because I need to figure it out on my own?
Yeah. Well, there's part of the addictive mindset, is thinking that I need to do it on my own. And the opposite of addiction, as some people have said, is actually connection. And
I like that.
Not isolation, but intimacy. So you got to find that. Yes, joining a group is the ideal. It's especially if you have a good group leader. Now, without good facilitation, a group can really flop, and it can even be more harmful, because you're like, oh yeah, I tried a group and it didn't work. And that can reinforce the belief that I need to do it on my own. So if you can find a good group, great. Unfortunately, according to Barna, only 7% of churches have a sexual recovery ministry of some kind. So they're hard to find in churches. The ministry called Pure Desire has some awesome online groups which are available. I have my own groups as well. You can join my group, get in contact with me. We'll give you that information later. But yeah, groups are awesome. I think ultimately you need one of three kinds of people, at least one of different people. The first is an ally, somebody who is your peer, somebody who's walking right beside you. They're at the same stage as you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a beginner, you got to find a beginner. If you're a little bit more mature, you got to find somebody who's similar to you. There's nothing worse than, finding an ally or finding an accountability partner and they're in a completely different stage where like you're seeing a lot of success, but they're having setbacks every other day. Or you feel like you're floundering while they are just cruising on to freedom.
Yeah, it's like, I just want to interject here because a lot of my listeners are fitness related because that's my background, where I come from. Imagine if you're like training and working out with somebody and you're 10 years in the game, you're powerlifting, doing bodybuilding shows. So you walk up to the bench and like you start with 225 for warm up and then you hit 405 for bench. But you got that training partner who is in their first year and they're struggling to get 135. That workout's not going to be productive for either one of you because you're going to be upset and angry because you're going to keep unracking the weights for him. He probably can't, assist you. He probably can't spot you on many of these things. And then his level of intensity is not going to be able to meet what you're used to. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there because it's like, awesome. I mean, if like, I know for me, like when I was bodybuilding, like my greatest progress always came when I had somebody in the gym that was at the same level. We had different things we brought to the table. Like, maybe I had a guy who was a tad bit stronger than me, but my ability to outwork him on an endurance standpoint would push him. So he'd push me on the weights and then I'd push him on the endurance side of things or vice versa. So yeah, I wanted to tie that into the training aspect of things because I know a lot of my audience, they are fitness guys.
Awesome.
So one of the three.
That's a great illustration. That's a really great illustration. And you got to build your muscles emotionally and spiritually the same way that we do physically.
Yep.
So you got to have an ally.
Okay.
We used to call them accountability partners. I like the term allies. It sounds a lot more supportive and it's, your band of brothers. You also have to have a guide, somebody who is ahead of you, who still is in a relationship with you. And this is what we talked about earlier, having a mentor, a counselor, a coach, a therapist, somebody who's been there. And so they're able to be like your Sherpa going up the mountain.
Not too far ahead though. Not like,
exactly.
Somebody that went down this journey, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, like somebody like yourself, 5 years, clean, went through the process of educating himself, learning, certifications, and now is still close enough to the guys that you're helping where you're like, yeah, I know exactly what that guy's going through because when I really think about it, I kind of get that like feeling in the pit of my stomach.
Right. I'm not too far removed from the trenches.
Yeah.
And so it's so helpful to have that leader who knows you personally. Yeah,
I want to use another sports analogy. It just came to me. It's like it's like those NBA coaches or the MLB coaches, professional basketball or professional baseball. Like the best ones are the ones that are like 5 years post their career. They stepped away, they spent some time with their family, shot around, gained a little bit of weight, got out of shape, but they're still so close to the game that they remember what it's like for those 48 minutes or those 9 innings. Once you've been a coach and there's a few exceptions, guys that have been in the coaching business, professional coaching for 20, 30 years, but typically it's like, that former player, former athlete who still got his swag, so he's relatable to the players. And he's just a few years removed from actually being, like you said, in the trenches. So
yeah. So at least get one ally, at least get one guide.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is an expert.
Okay.
And I think this is maybe not essential, but it is a supercharger. It's an accelerator when You can read some of these books. You can read my book, which is Redeemed Sexuality. This is good material.
Okay.
But I'm more of a guide than an expert. You know, Patrick Carnes, Mark Lacer, Jay Stringer, Marnie Free. These are some of the names of Christian sex addiction therapists who have made all of their best insights public and available for cheap in their books. So you don't have to pay thousands of dollars to learn from the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They've made their wisdom available, and all you got to do is, you know, go to the library or, you know, get an audio book. And I mean, you got to get, I think you got to get some level of knowledge. And so having an ally, a guide, and your expert of choice is a recipe for redemption.
Can the expert also be the guide, or can the guide also be the expert? I know in your case, you said that you were the guide and you lean to those guys. And I'm sure most guides are working towards expert, but maybe that expert is maybe more like the general manager in the sports team, the guy that's sitting up in the office directing it and saying, okay, coach, like now this is what you need to go through. But are there cases where they could be the same person operates as a guide and an expert?
And I'm operating that way for my private clients.
Yeah.
And it works out. But we don't just limit them to me. They got to hear from everybody else. They got to hear from those who have been doing this for 20 years, for 30 years, because there's so much wisdom.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff I'm sharing with you, you know, my breakthrough about sexual fantasies, that came from Patrick Carnes, who's like the grandfather of this field.
Yeah. And it's a part of my coaching too, that I do with my guys. Like I have assignments, tasks, you know, things that I'm giving them to work on every single week that I've learned, picked up the way, put into, you know, similar things as you have. But in addition to that, it's like, dude, you got to, like, I'm going to have you read, actually assign them, you know, bi-weekly reading books. And it's things that have helped me along the journey, but it's things that I know better to hear it directly from the source than kind of a watered down version coming through me.
Yeah. I mean, you can only soak up so much from an hour coaching session.
Yeah.
Once a week. And, you know, if you're in a group, you might not get as much individual attention as you'd like, but that's where the whole picture can really support you better than, you know, just doing a group or just seeing a counselor. It's the best way to do it is to make it a lifestyle and really immerse yourself in what you're trying to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a saying that I've kind of used, you know, in order to end your fight or battle with porn addiction, you have to become the person that's no longer addicted to porn.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
That become word, it's very important. You know, it's a growth-based approach to recovery. Yeah, we'll talk about, you know, the triggers, the past, the things that brought you to who you are. But ultimately, our goal is to rebuild your body. I had a health and fitness background, extremely important to me, what you're putting in from a nutrition standpoint and the output that you're doing with your exercise. So rebuild your body, rewire your brain, because, you know, we know the negative effects, and we've seen the brain scans, the MRIs of like the comparison between somebody addicted to porn and somebody addicted to heroin. And there's proof now and evidence supporting like daily gratitude actually has the ability to rewire the neural pathways in your brain. So that's an important element. And reshaping your heart, which I know is very similar to kind of some of the things that you're doing with your guys. But yeah, I'm taking a growth-centric approach. Like we're not going to address too much. We're not going to harp on the past. We'll identify it, but our goal is to become that person that you were created.
I love that. Man, I absolutely love it. And it's very clear that you've done your homework. You know, you've learned from the best.
Yeah.
And what stood out to me was when you said you have to become the person. That's what's so powerful, because when you can do that, you don't just quit the behavior. You outgrow it like a pacifier.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, that's when I was a little kid, that's what I used to deal with pain. And now I'm a new person. So it's not just, I'm trying to stop. That's not who I am anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that guy doesn't exist anymore. I'm a beloved son of the Most High King. And when my choices align with that reality, porn has no power.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to Tony Robbins again, but he's got the analogy. He talks about like, if you had two people that were both trying to quit smoking cigarettes, and you offer them a cigarette, both of them are saying it at the same time, you offer them both a cigarette. One says, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit. The other one says, no, I'm not a smoker anymore. The likelihood of that first person at some point in their life smoking again, because they're still associating themselves with being a smoker. I'm trying to quit. No, like we're not trying anything.
Yeah.
Doing it, it's going to be done, and we're going to be a new person.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, can I share a story too? I'm just way back in the 4th century, there was this guy named Augustine who we would now say, he was probably a sex addict, but that didn't exist back then. And he became probably the most famous Christian guy in the world. So he had a very colorful past with prostitutes and harems, and he became a believer in Jesus, and he changed his life. So one day a prostitute is calling out to him. He's walking down the street in the middle of the city. She calls out to him and she says, "Augustine, it is I." And he says, "Yes, but it is not I."
Wow.
And sometimes porn calls your name.
Yeah.
It's like, "Hey, Frank. Hey, Drew." And you're like, it's not me anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to address a real serious topic, and you made reference to it here a little bit. You talked about the importance of you and your beliefs and becoming a Christian being a very vital part of where you are now. Your mission is to help men of God and porn. So you're very clear on what you believe in, who you are, and who you're trying to help. But you said only 7% of churches have a sexual addiction program or course to be involved in. I've heard multiple statistics, and I just want to kind of spout them off here. I'm not sure which one is actually correct, but I've heard and read that if you were able to remove both the men and women that attend church on a regular basis, so we're talking men and women who are attending church regularly, maybe not weekly, but twice a month at a minimum. If you're able to remove them from the viewership of porn, you would cut the industry in half. I saw a statistic yesterday that over 70% of men actively involved in the church watch porn on a regular basis. So why do you think that there's such an epidemic inside of the church currently, and what do we need to do to stop it?
Great question. You look at those stats and you think, there's something wrong here. Part of it is pastors, because a lot of pastors have a lifestyle that's a recipe for relapse, and a lot of them are struggling with pornography too. So from a leadership standpoint, even if you don't struggle with porn, but you suspect, it's possible that certain members of your staff struggle with porn, and you hear about a ministry or you think about starting something, that's already hard enough because people are overworked and overcommitted and burnt out. Mm-hmm. But then you add to that the possibility that we might need to have some really hard conversations with our staff members. We might need, who knows what kind of scandal is going to come out. You hear about the pastors falling from their positions, and you don't want to introduce that into your church. I mean, there's a lot of resistance in church leadership because people are afraid to lose their jobs, or they're afraid to have a big mess on their hands when somebody else has to lose their jobs. So it's hard to get groups started. And another reason why is because even though so many of us are struggling, toxic shame results in silence.
Yeah.
Especially for the ladies.
Yeah.
The ladies feel like they're the only ones.
I want to share a story around that. So we attend a very contemporary modern mega church here in Tampa, 6 locations. They're kind of new age in terms of, we do series, and just a few months back, there was a series that they titled Desire, and talked about, teachings of the Bible, but premarital sex was week 1. Week 2 was, the LGBTQ community. I hope I got that right.
Yeah.
And how to have these conversations. We knew going into the 3rd week, they didn't tell us what it was going to be, but I had this inclination that it was going to be around the topic of porn. And we had some really close friends that attend with us on a weekly basis. Danny Vega, who is real big, kind of figure in the keto community. Well, they're closely tied to this organization called Fight the New Drug. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so they've sent us a handful of free shirts. One of them being the Porn Kills Love shirt. So Danny, who's like just jacked beyond belief. I mean, he's been labeled the most jacked guy in keto. So he shows up in this shirt on that Sunday. Porn Kills Love, bright red, tight sleeves, muscles popping. I mean, but we knew based upon the looks that he was getting, because it was one of those things like, it raised awareness for a lot of guys, because it was these kind of odd, strange looks. Like what, like how dare you kind of wear that here? Like almost like, and that tells me like, dude, we need to be wearing those shirts every single week, because there's some underlying shame going on. So yeah, I think
and you hit the nail on the head. It's shame. It's shame both from people attending church, and shame if you're in leadership and struggling.
Yeah. So it starts at the top. So it's something that we need to continue to address. Like, I mean, do you once your guys have gone through, their recovery and they're free, like, do you encourage them to reach out to their leadership, to ask for these type of things?
I have a guy right now who is a pastor, and he is starting a ministry at his church, and here's how they're framing it. He's looking for guys to help him start a ministry, rather than, if you are struggling with unwanted sexual behavior, come sign up with me. If you want to help me lead this new ministry for those other guys who are struggling, come talk to me. And inevitably, the people who respond are also struggling.
Yeah.
And that's the way that Pure Desire has done it at certain times too. Nick Stumbo talks about this in his book, Setting Us Free, that if you want to motivate people in a church context, invite them to be heroes. Invite them to be the leaders rather than the ones who have the problem.
Yeah, it's almost an invitation to become that ally or become that guide for somebody else. Like maybe you're a few steps further by just acknowledging what's going on. So you are further enough ahead to reach out to that guy that's not even accepting it as of yet. Love the connection there. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really a challenge in our church environments, and that's one reason why I'm choosing to try to reach people through social media, because in some ways, I don't think the church is ready for kind of addressing it at the scale of the problem.
Yeah, and you're fairly new in like the launching of your site and in your social media. Yeah. How has the response been? Because I came. I launched this podcast last summer, but I had social media, I had an online business, I had a following, people that came to me for muscle building. So for me, I went through an element of doubting, should I do this? Should I not? It was life-changing when I did. The minute I opened up and just shared what I had gone through, it changed my life only for the good. There's a reason why the podcast is called The Superhuman Life. But I know for me, it's like the response and feedback that I get now from guys just by sharing and helping a little bit. I mean, I haven't even gone deep into some of the work that I know is in store for me in the future. It blows away anything I ever heard from any guy that said, oh, you helped me lose 20 pounds of fat, or, oh, you helped me build my biceps, or, oh, you helped me get ready for, for that contest or whatever, which I still love all of that fitness stuff. But it's like, I feel like real impact and real change in the world is taking place. So,
That's
what was the response, maybe not socially, but, from your friends, family, when you kind of came out and because it is a topic that people just don't want to hear about.
Yeah. The response has been people saying, hey, we need this, keep going. This is so valuable to me. I've been most surprised by the responses of women. Even though I'm advertising it and promoting it just for men, women are hungry for this too. And a lot of them are so under-resourced. There are tons of books out there on how to quit porn written for men and very few for women. So that's why Redeemed Sexuality here is for men's or women's groups.
Okay.
And yet I acknowledge I'm not able to empathize or understand the experiences of women nearly as well. And so we need women warriors to rise up and help them too. Ultimately, the thing that keeps me going, besides the call of God on my life, is seeing those guys who have worked with me come back and say, like, wow, I've been porn free for over a year, and saying, I feel like I have trust with my wife now, and there's nothing I have to hide from her. One guy recently on my podcast says, I'm free to be a father now. I'm not going to pass on this generational curse to my children. It stops with me. And I'm starting this thing called the White Bow Tie Club. So if you're porn free for over a year, you get to join the White Bow Tie Club. And Frank, you get to be in it too.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm going to send you your bow tie. And for anyone else out there, if you're in the White Bow Tie Club, let me know. And the white bow tie basically symbolizes honor, that rather than the shame that has held us down and kept us coming back to porn or other limitations, like, we can choose honor because of the one who created us and redeemed us and who loves us no matter what,
Amazing. Yeah. I'm in. Like, send the bow tie. I want a copy of your book too. So if you want to throw one of those in, if not, tell me where I need to go. Tell me where I need to go pick it up. So I want to just, bring this to a close here in a minute. I'm going to give you an opportunity to, plug all your work and everything and send guys where they can learn more about you. But, you've referenced a handful of books and, you talked about the importance of, the learning, the education side. Do you have a list of, I think I wrote one down here, The Unwanted by Jay Stringer, obviously your book, but, best resources in getting started for guys, things that you found for you. I'm a lover of books. I'm a lover of information. So something I always try to ask is, where can we send guys to learn more about these topics that we've discussed here?
Yeah, there's a ton. If you want to learn about trauma, The Body Keeps the Score.
Okay.
Is a fantastic book. This one's called Wired for Intimacy: How Pornography Hijacks the Male Brain.
Yeah.
That was one of the first ones for me. This is Unwanted, which is the book that I use with all of my one-on-one clients right now.
Okay. That's the one that talks about the understanding of fantasy, right?
Yes. And we also have a digital workbook and a community for that as well at unwantedworkbook.com.
Okay.
Which is pretty exciting.
Okay.
And there's actually an assessment you can take that will correlate your experiences with your specific unwanted fantasies, which is interesting.
Awesome. And then we got your book. Where can people find your book?
So you can get this on Amazon. You can get videos by me walking you through each chapter at redeemedsexuality.com. And this one's specifically for groups. I mean, you talked about the power of groups, and so I wrote it for groups. You know what, Frank? You know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for the resource that talks about rebuilding your body as part of this journey. I want to see the fitness side of recovery on my shelf.
It's coming. It's coming for sure.
Awesome.
I wasn't sold on the idea. I knew it worked for me. So I have a connection to what I believe is the carnivore diet. I don't know how much you know about the carnivore diet, but it's this meat-based approach. And I think we'll probably talk more about this maybe on your podcast when I come on. I don't want to hijack that completely. But there's some research that I've done, and I've had multiple conversations with some really intelligent people that understand the science from a physiological standpoint of what takes place when you eliminate everything from your diet except for meat. And I've also had conversations with hands full of people who have overcome their porn addiction simply by switching their nutrition. So
Wow.
yeah, taking all of my background and understanding of the human body, and I'm working on it. So
Awesome.
yeah, so I'm glad you're pushing me for that, because yeah, I got notes over here on the whiteboard, and it's a process. I just rolled out a coaching program literally within the last handful of weeks. I've had this calling that was kind of sitting there, knowing it was something I needed to do. And I really needed a push from some great mentors of mine, going back to that, having people in your corner leading you along the way. I've invested into business mentors. I have an incredible, group of men that are just kind of in my corner. And just a handful of weekends ago, I was at an event, and it was just a constant theme. Anytime I mentioned like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about doing this, it was like, what are you waiting for? Like, just get it out there. So in the process now of working with the first handful of guys that joined the program, and, testing some of the theories and strategies on them, which will give me, enough of a anecdotal research case study type of effect to be able to then put it in an actual book that I'm saying, okay, like, cause I don't want to just like think of something and then jot it down and say, yeah, this is great, this is going to work. It's like, no, it worked for me. It's worked for people that I've talked to, but now let me like actually like put it into work a little bit with all these guys so that it will come out. But yeah, you'll be one of the first person to copy when it's, cause I'd love, your expert level feedback on what I'm doing here. I mean, I think you're a little bit further in your process than I am. So I appreciate your time here today. I think it's cool, here we're just early February, have a whole year ahead of us. And obviously you have some incredible ambitions and goals. So, what are kind of some big things that you're looking forward to this year, in your personal life or, in your coaching business? And is there anything that you're working on that you're getting ready to, release to the public, I guess?
Yeah. So my private coaching program is having a lot of success. One of my goals is to have a bunch of guys in the white bow tie club by the end of the year. I want to see more marriages saved before they start. I want to see more futures decisively altered, but I'm developing something called Husband Material Academy, which will essentially give people a full experience of the exact same thing that I'm taking people through one-on-one, but at a bigger scale. And that's my dream right now. And stay tuned. It's not a reality yet.
That's awesome, man. I want to see, I don't know what a bunch is to you, but I want to see hundreds of bow ties, hundreds of white bow ties.
Yeah. We have the white wedding dress for women. It's like, the white wedding dress is such a symbol for people. Like, what about the guys? We need something.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, Drew, man, I appreciate you so much for coming on here, opening up, sharing some real, intimate parts of your story and your journey. I think that there's so much, that guys should be able to take away. We didn't just, talk about you though. You provided some really powerful tips and strategies for guys that are maybe, living through this right now and haven't taken that first step. So just want to acknowledge you and, thank you for your time here today. And thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom and, your experiences. And I truly believe that there's going to be a guy out there this conversation is going to impact him and change his life. And that's my goal with every single episode is if we can just impact one person. I know we do much more than that, but real change, a guy taking a step, like that's my goal with at least this one. So before we kind of wrap it up here, where can people find Drew, your website, your YouTube, where you hanging out at, if they want to get in touch with you, if they're interested in, in your coaching, just where you at?
Yeah. Husbandmaterial.com is the website for this ministry. If you want to be husband material, then quitting porn is a must. But how do you do that? That's what Husband Material is all about. Looks like our Instagram account is generating a lot of conversations. So that's Husband Material Men.
Okay.
And then if you want to sign up for a free coaching session with me, you can do that at drewboa.com.
Okay. And yeah, we'll get all that plugged down in the show notes. You have quite a bit of free stuff you're putting out on YouTube, correct?
YouTube is also there, Husband Material with Drew Boa.
Okay.
And the podcast too, same thing. And we're telling more stories, and coming soon, the story of Frank Rich.
Yes. Yeah. I'm excited to come on and, speak to your audience and just flop and have more conversation, man. Like I shared with you at the beginning, like you were the least amount of research I did for a show because I wanted to unpack just here organically on the conversation. But I know, Drew, I definitely want to make sure that, we keep in touch. I want to support everything you're doing. I want to continue to bring value if I can in any way, support you guys. If you guys need help on the training, nutrition stuff, shoot them over. And I just want to keep an ongoing kind of, conversation between the two of us.
Man, that's definitely a way that you can help me because I feel like I've learned a lot about spiritual approaches. I'm learning more and more about psychological approaches and neuroscientific approaches. But when it comes to the physical nutrition side, I need a mentor or I need an expert.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely make that happen. So cool. Awesome, man. One question I always kind of wrap up, and it's real general, kind of higher level, and I love to see where people kind of take it. I titled the podcast "A Superhuman Life" because I believe that we were all created for a very specific purpose in this world, and then when we actually take control of our body that we're experiencing life in, and combine that with that belief that we can ultimately do what we were designed to do, we can then create our own superhuman life. So one thing I always ask everybody is, what's your definition of living a superhuman life?
Mm-hmm. My definition of living a superhuman life is 4 words: trust God, no fear. For me, that fear-based response in my brain, especially the flight, in terms of flight or freeze, man, I want to fly away. I want to escape reality. But the superhuman life is being present by trusting God and showing up in opposition to the fear that would hold me back.
You heard it, guys, right here from Drew Boa.
Trust God, no fear.
Trust God, no fear. Brother, thank you so much for all of your time, all of your sharing, all of your expertise today. And for you guys out there that are listening to this, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. If this is your first time checking out this podcast and you have not done so yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button right there on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you are listening to. And the same ask that I have at every single one of the ends of these podcasts, we're on a mission here. We're on a mission to help men break free from the shackles of porn addiction through the power of faith and fitness. We can only do so much with our words in this message, but if we can have your continued support, there's somebody out there that that is dealing with this struggle or any struggle in their life, and this message is going to resonate with them and help them, please do us one favor of just sharing it with them. But other than that, guys, once again, I appreciate you all for sharing this time with us, sharing this conversation. I know Drew does as well. Make sure to link up all of his information down in the show notes. But until next time, guys, love you and have a blessed day.